Hello, this is Brent Anderson, and welcome to another Pilates Hour. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have my two very good friends, Viktor and Daniel, with me today. And I say today, but actually Daniel's with us tomorrow because it's already morning tomorrow in Australia. So super, just incredible gratitude for getting up at like 4 in the morning to be with us. And I hope that you have time to take a nap afterwards and go back to sleep at least a little bit. But minds never rest. So I think that's, it's funny because Sunday, I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do a meditation for Serafino Ambrosio in Italy for a little thing that he was doing. And I did go back to sleep for an hour afterwards. So we'll see. And Viktor from Los Angeles or Southern California. And great to have both of you with me today on the Pilates Hour. I'd like to just sort of introduce, and I think that when, most of us in the Pilates world are very familiar with the two products that these two gentlemen have developed in our industry that I feel are very appropriate. I've probably only endorsed two products in my 30 years of Pilates. One of them is the Oov and the other one is the Konnector, and I have both the creators of them with me. So I feel very honored to have you with me. Daniel Vladeta from Australia comes from a background of neuroscience and osteopathic work. He's worked in a number of different industries, had a vision of the Oov, took it to full manufacturing. We met in Australia, and Daniel's like, you got to look at this thing that I did, and we started looking at it. And the more that I got on it, the more I used it with my clients, the more I was convinced that it was a stroke of genius. So thank you for bringing the Oov into our industry, Daniel. I think that it's just an amazing product, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And Viktor and I have known each other for a long time as well. And Viktor first brought it to Polestar, and I was like, this is a manufacturing thing, but I love it. I love the idea of it. I don't have the ability for distribution. Talked to Balanced Body, and so he talked to Ken Endelman, and Balanced Body has been, producing the Konnector. And recently, in the last 2 years, Viktor and I have reconnected from the standpoint of education. And Viktor's education is really blowing up all around the world of people wanting to outfit their facilities with the Konnector. And when I asked Viktor, why would somebody want to put a Konnector on their reformer? His answer to me always is, well, why wouldn't they? So we're going to talk about that a little bit, Viktor. And it's not from a place of cockiness. It's from a very sound place of what we do as Pilates teachers, of why we would want to have the Konnector and the Oov in our repertoire of tools in a Pilates facility. So I thought I would start off and just ask Daniel, and I'll ask Viktor a little bit later, but tell us a little bit, Daniel, a little bit more about sort of the history and the evolution of the Oov, and what was the inspiration behind it for you to, it's a huge undertaking. I know you're involved in a million things, but to undertake something from concept to manufacturing to distribution to education, there just aren't very many people that can do that as a solo show. So tell us a little bit about your history.
Thank you, Brent. And thank you, first of all, Brent and Polestar, for having me here. It is a interesting undertaking. It's been an interesting journey. Like the Oov idea started in the mid-90s, just trying to solve problems for my patients of what I was seeing in clinic, and trying to understand how I can get my patients to change what they're doing with their body. We've always been very involved at my clinics and people I work with in actually doing movement re-education, not just manual interventions, which is what I was trained to do, and how important movement was to update the operating system of the brain, not just change the tissue and the movement of the joint locally, but integrate it back globally back into how the person's using that change in movement. And I started with a series of rolled up towels and Pilates balls and Mackenzie rollers and all of those things in the 90s that all of us who were practicing them, Brent, as you know, and trying to create this situation where my patients felt what it felt like to axially elongate and control their spine axially. And even to the point where I started creating polystyrene foam shapes, which we got laser cut, and then we'd shave them down to specific each individual patient. And we went through this whole process, and you get them in this beautiful position, and they'd be in this really lovely position. And I was always deflated when I got there. All this work of getting them in this great position, this support, holding them there, because what I realized was that when they got there, they didn't have to work at controlling it. And this is where I started to understand the difference between passive positioning versus dynamic and active control of that position. And it really changed this philosophy of what ideal spine and ideal neutral spine is. And it's actually not a passive position. It's actually all of the spine positions are ideal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do them. It's really about then, can you control each of those positions and integrate those positions into something more dynamic?
Yeah, I'm going to make a comment there. This idea of active versus passive. Now, my research was looking at active versus passive intervention for chronic low back pain, and taking it, of course, to another level of looking at things like positional release, like we all practice, like how can we position the body in a way that we could get the fascia or the tissue to release to obtain this posture. And when you and I were first talking at one of the first physical therapy conferences we went to, and we approached some of my older friends in the Pilates world, Darcy Umfred in her 70s, and Nancy Bill, who was the director of UC San Francisco PT school. Tell us a little bit about that conversation, because I think that was sort of the icing on the cake when we got that confirmation from these two giants in the physical therapy world in the United States. Darcy Umfred wrote the book on neurorehabilitation, and Nancy Bill basically wrote the book on how motor response adaptation happens in the brain with rhesus monkeys, and how that conveyed to sensory integration. So she was like the queen of sensory integration. And we've always talked about sensory integration as being a peripheral stimulus. So we're trying to remap the homunculus with keys and coins and different things with our fingers to get that mapping. But we never talked about axial skeletal sensory integration. And so when Darcy Umfred and Nancy Bill sort of coined the phrase with us, we knew what it was doing. You and I were both, impressed with what we were seeing with the spontaneous organization. What were your thoughts when, we met up with Darcy and Nancy? And of course, they went on to take the training, and they fell in love with the product, and they've been promoting it in their circles around the world. But how did that feel to you after, developing something? I think it's one thing to have somebody, like me in the industry say, oh yeah, this is a great product, but to have two giants sort of come together at the same time, what were your feelings at that time?
Well, you were there, so it was an amazing meeting, and definitely two very influential, especially in the neuroscience world, and Darcy writing Neurological Rehabilitation, the textbook that we used. I think it's in its 6th or 7th edition now. But yeah, like we went into a rabbit hole talking to those two, and I was on the stand, and you guys were pulling me back, and I didn't want to leave the conversation that we were having. And yeah, it's one, definitely affirmation of what we're doing, and that was really wonderful. But then in the other sense, just opening up to realize that the knowledge that those two have, and what they've seen clinically, and the work that they've done. So more just even going, okay, wow, realizing that I'm just on my beginning of my journey, and they're really still changing the paradigm in understanding what the implication of the nervous system in changing movement, and definitely that axial feedback and understanding, in their words, what we're trying to do with the OOV was very, very instrumental for me.
Yeah, I think that was a big turning point for me as well, because I knew I was looking for that very specific sort of neurological way of being able to define what we were seeing through your training and through the OOV. And then to have, Nancy say, that's sensory integration of the axial skeleton. It was like, bang, that's exactly what it is. And, when you think of, and from a neurological standpoint in the brain, we talk about the motor cortex and the sensory cortex, and it has the homunculus on it, which the homunculus is the map sort of the body, and that map gets smudged. And this is what Nancy Bill's work is in. So if we dive into this just a little bit, and I don't want to spend too much time because Daniel and Victor and I could stay in this kind of topic for days. We'd go without eating for days, just talking about this stuff and drawing pictures and experimenting with things. But the idea that the homunculus, or the map of the human body, both in the sensory and the motor cortex, smudge. So if you thought of having this beautiful drawing, but it was done in a fresh ink, and you took your thumb and you smudged it, that it would change. So it might look like, 4 fingers look like 1 finger now in the sensory cortex. And so we've watched that with things like focal dystonias, where people have involuntary movement patterns playing the piano or the trumpet or a dentist or something because of strain-related problems. And so to me, when we said, wow, a sensory integration device for the central axial skeleton was huge, mainly because, here we deal with people with chronic pain, and the messages coming up from the body, the dysfunction, the strain, all those messages smudge that homunculus, both of the sensory and the motor cortex. And it's very hard to get access to remap that intricacy of what is 2 degrees of right rotation at L3 or at L4, and how does that relate to L2? And the details of it were just way too complex to be able, we could talk through it, but it would take us 2 hours to talk about 2 segments, or put them on an OOV, and in 5 seconds, 10 seconds, their nervous system's already responding to the mapping that was false. They couldn't hold their leg up 5 seconds ago, and now they can. They couldn't move their arm, now they can. They couldn't roll a foot out on a ball, now they can. And so that sort of reorganization, without you having to say, let's get the multifidi and the interossei on that segment at L4, L5 to fire 20% at exactly 50 milliseconds after the intention. It's like, that's where people were going. And it was like, this is ridiculous, right? So,
well, it doesn't make sense also, because, that's the subconscious brain's role. And we understand now in neuroscience that, that the conscious brain is detailed training mode, and it's about 40 instructions per second, but the subconscious is big picture, it's simultaneous, it's play mode, and it's 11 million instructions per second. So, there's no way that our conscious brain can actually do all of the bits of information processing, to do all of those things at one time. And I think that's really what Konnector and OOV, what both of our intentions were, is to set out to work with the subconscious. But going back to the dystonia and how 4 fingers, the smudging, works into one, the spine, and for all of us on this webinar who've worked with people with lower back pain or any sort of back pain, know that you also get these people where they lost the ability and the definition within their central axis, and it's almost becomes binary. It's all or nothing. And I think giving feedback devices where they have to learn to segmentally control again is part of what both Victor and I have discussed a lot.
Hey, speaking of Konnector, let's jump over to Victor for a little bit. I know we'll come back and we'll get to see some videos that Daniel gave us, and also some videos from Victor. Victor, you and I go back quite a ways in the Pilates world, and Victor comes from a professional dance background, got into the movement science world. He has deep in his heart the entrepreneur and the creative spirit that he has more devices that we haven't even seen yet that he is waiting to launch. talk to us a little bit about sort of, what led to the Konnector. And I know that you'd worked with Pino in Italy, and I know that you had some gyrotonic background as well, probably through Pino at that time. Of course, he had that amazing contraption that, could provide feedback in all planes of movement. Everybody was sort of looking for that same kind of thing in the 80s and 90s. Tell us a little bit about the evolution of Konnector and what, how it came to be, for us, that we now enjoy.
All right. Thank you so much for having me here again. Great to see you, Daniel and Brent and everyone. Yeah, so I was a dancer, professional dancer. That's all I knew, just to move. And when I came to United States and we opened the Pilates studio when I couldn't afford dancing anymore. And first couple of years went through just like my dance training, I did what I've been taught, right? So it's dancing, it's like that. You do plie, you do tendu, don't question, keep repeating until you do it perfectly. A couple of years, and I approached the same way to Pilates. This is what they told me, this is what the exercises is, and this is what I'm gonna do, no matter who's in front of me. But more I teach, I realize I'm not teaching the same body. Everybody's not same. So I start to question, I start to customize the movements for the needs of the client that I have. And one of the things was I was very frustrated, the lack of movement on the Pilates reformer ropes. I was literally, bring your legs in the straps, bring them down and up, bend and push. Let's get creative and free, do circles, woo! And that was it. That was the most exciting thing that we could do, is circles. Yeah. So I'm like, why can't we do something more? And because we couldn't, I brought a lot of my clients to mat work. And during that time, I realized there were a lot of coordination problems, connection problems, sense of body awareness. And to help them, which is, if you want to show them right now, the connections on mat video, I decide to use bands to connect my clients' limbs to give them a sense of understanding where their limbs are and how they are connected to each other. Cool. So obviously this evolved as well, but my idea, once again, not give them the resistance, it was the understanding what happens the rest of the limbs when you move the right arm or the left leg. And once I did that and I got a great feedback, I wanted to really replicate that on the reformer, because I really valued the reformer as well, and I was using him a lot. And this was back in days when we didn't have towers built in the reformers either. We had just the reformers. There were no tower option there. So then the first Konnector came. I was able to basically put pulley system and create a one rope pulley system to connect the two straps together. When you have two ropes, individual, they are not connected to each other and they don't talk to each other and they are fixed to the reformer. So I had to do a one rope that is connected and attach the straps, and that rope was connected to the reformer with the pulley. I was able to get reciprocal movement pattern that we used to it, and it's functional for us. Or I was able to create one leg moving and the other leg is not moving. So, and the biggest thing was you could do that with the regular reformer, but there will be a resistance only when one leg and the other limb will have no connection or no resistance. When using the Konnector, Even there was an isometric hold on one leg while the other leg was moving. The isometric load changed. It became heavier, it became lighter. So basically, once again, the client had to respond to that change to able to maintain stability on the sporting leg. So I did that, then it was really good. I was happy, clients were happy. Then I start to get another itch. I start to say, yeah, but why we not moving with the whole limbs? Why we just doing 2 arms only or 2 legs only? Why we don't get to work the full body? Why we not connecting the limbs? So I did a couple of changes and I was able to put 4 straps. So now you can actually have 1 strap for each limb and work all limbs together independently, but dependent each other's movement patterns.
Yeah, I think that is, and this goes back to the idea of, continual feedback and load happening through the extremity. So where, my impression with the OOV, and you can also use it for extremities, of course, but that axial skeletal input and continual feedback mechanism. And Viktor, again, has influence on the central skeleton. I don't want to think that they don't have influence on each other, but being able to have the, the load variance and dynamic load going through all of the extremities. And I know
Can I just say one thing? Variable was the really key word. Is that it actually it's not consistent, it's actually variable, and I think that's really relevant and why Konnector is so powerful.
Yeah, it is the, as you're moving through a range of motion or even holding, the weak points are going to jump out like a big light bulb of where you're not organized or where you're not connected or where you're missing a link. You have a video, Viktor, as well of actually demonstrating the Konnector. Can we maybe take a look at that and tell us a little bit about that?
Somebody with scoliosis, 100%, everybody says they feel in a different spot and they are surprised. Why am I feeling here? I never felt there before, because they cannot use the fixation point of the straps anymore.
Yeah. Maybe just explain a little bit about what those people are feeling, the people that are participating in the Konnector class, that would be different than what they actually feel in a traditional foot strap.
Traditional foot strap is mainly it enables you to cheat in a way. People ask me, what is the difference between Konnector and the regular reformer? Or they say, if I add the Konnector, would I able to go back to my regular reformer repertoire? Or do I lose my regular reformer? And the shortest answer that I say, you could do everything you can do with the reformer except one thing. And the answer is the cheating, the compensation. You do not have compensation plan anymore. If you use your right side more than left, the Konnector is going to show. You're going to see that the right limb is moving faster than the left. Or any asymmetries you might have your body, the right leg is shorter, left leg is longer. We do not have to deal anymore with the clients, this is longer, this is shorter, or I don't have an even equal weight in my limbs. The Konnector automatically adjusts all those asymmetries in the body or the movement patterns.
Yeah.
Connects the upper limb with the lower limbs. You are free to do like bilateral work, unilateral work, ipsilateral work, contralateral work, and
I love being able to do the standing work, because you can make it work in all the standing exercises and squats and jumps and leaps and lunges and unilateral, bilateral. I mean, I just think that, we don't do enough standing work even on the ground. And so it also gave us a tremendous amount of information. You know what I'd like to do right now, we have some questions and some comments that are starting to come in. Before I start answering them, Daniel, I'd like you to, you know, to show your video clip that you submitted or two, and maybe explain a little bit about what they're going to be seeing, then have Melissa show that. I'd like them to see all the equipment or the actual use of where this, what we're talking about, for those that might not know. And then we'll start off answering some questions and get some information out to them. So Daniel.
I think the first one that Melissa's got is a seated exercise. It's just looking at some sitting in the saddle with the large part of the OOF supporting the lower back. And this just gives you a different look at some of the positioning that we use other than the normal supine, the three curves supporting the three curves of the spine. So I think the first video, Melissa, is the seated exercise. So let's go into that.
Another great way to work really, really lower abdominals is to sit in the saddle, sitting bones on either side of the small end of the OOF, leaning back so your lower back is supported by the large part of the OOF. Here you can lift one leg into tabletop and hold, dropping the leg back down, the other leg into tabletop and hold, coming back down. If this is too hard for you, you can have your fingertips holding off just off the ground to give you support. This is a really strong lower abdominal exercise, many variations in this to come.
If we start doing things like that on the ground, our body is in a two-dimensional strategy. It doesn't need to control the pelvis in three planes. As soon as you put the body in a three-dimensional situation, it needs to find a way to do that task three-dimensionally. And I really like what you said before with the Konnector, is that it's really nice to do some of the standing work as well. I think one thing that we do forget in the rehab world, definitely, and even in the Pilates world, is that we don't do enough standing work.
We lay down way too much.
Yeah, and really, you know, even Joseph Pilates' philosophy is that it's about getting people to be able to live their life with vigor and zest. It's all about getting them to be able to do what they need to do to live their life. And I think we forget that most, you know, importantly, is to integrate what we do into standing. And I think, Melissa, if I just quickly go to the next video, it's a standing, just to show how dynamically you put someone in a standing position. And what the OOF offers is a very specific plane of instability. When you put someone on a Bosu or a disc, the plane of instability is variable. What we find in our rehabilitation and our exercise protocols is that we challenge specific planes, whether it be the coronal plane or the coronal plane or the sagittal plane or the transverse plane, and see in which plane that person can't control their body, and then be very specific in what plane you're going to work with them in. And you'll see that we can change the direction of the OOF to challenge which plane we want to work on. So Melissa, if you roll the next video.
So now we've turned the OOF 90 degrees. The instability of the OOF is, instead of being side to side, is front to back. Positioning on the OOF, hold on to something, put one foot on the highest point of the large part of the OOF, and then get your other foot up there. And so first of all, bring them together, and then slowly spread them apart so they're evenly spaced, and you get a nice even place for both feet, where one foot's not turned in or higher than the other. Now, we have the ability now to train a different plane of movement, where before we had the OOF moving side to side, now we have them OOF moving front to back. So what we're going to work on is taking the OOF, and let's see if we can rock the OOF as far forward as we can, our toes pointing towards the ground, and feel what happens to your posture when you do this. You're going to actually work into a different posture, that when you rock the OOF all the way back, and you're back on your heels, and your head lifts up. So first of all, see if you can take your body to one extreme, and then the other, and then let's see if we can work in between the two, and rock the OOF back and forth. Ankle mobility is essential for walking. We need to train this movement to get our walking properly. So it's a fun way, an easy way to start that process with 2 feet on the OOV crossway.
Dissociation of the ankle is extremely important in gait. We know that. But secondly, is that foot position influences which chain in our body we preference. So when we actually plantarflex, we're going to influence the posterior chain. We can concentrically activate the posterior chain in the leg, which changes what the trunk does. And vice versa, when we go into dorsiflexion, we concentrically activate more the anterior chain of the leg, which then biases more the posterior chain in the trunk. So you know, giving people that ability to oscillate between the two and go to the two extremes to then find what their neutral is, right, where their middle position is. You know, giving them that sensation, and you can see how much she had to work to actually do that, and how dynamic that material is. And it's not just the rolling of the OOF, but it's actually the pushing back of that material that is actually, you know, the micro movements as well as the macro movements that is making the nervous system having to work to do that task.
You know, you bring up a really good point of the idea of, you know, the word neutral. And often we think of neutral as being skeletal neutral, but there also is a neuromuscular neutral as to how we perform. And that's what we're actually tapping into in these different systems is, you know, where is their neuromuscular neutral in that position? Because it really manifests. You can see it. You see where they have challenges. You might tell them to go into a neutral position that you think is a skeletal neutral, and they're all over the place. They can't control it. And that's sort of that idea of moving through and in and out of these positions and having input that comes at them, you know, from directions they can't even imagine. We can't even explain what you're talking about as far as saying the amount of pressure that comes up on the head of the 5th metatarsal compared to the 4th metatarsal, or to the skin that's on the, you know, it's I think this is what we're looking at, is trying to create a system that has this type of communication. Now we have a lot of information.
Can I say one more thing? Is have you noticed that I'm not calling it an exercise, I'm calling it a task. And for everybody listening, start researching task-based learning, because I think that's what the OOV and the Konnector do, is put someone in a situation that they have to figure out that task. And there is no instruction in this is how you do this, you know, because what we're finding with 3D motion capture, there is no perfect movement. I think that is actually, you know, something that we need to change, that there's multiple ways to do the same thing. And putting someone in a situation that they have to figure out a task is very powerful. And there's so much neurological research on that how our brain gets rewarded to figure something out, but the amygdala creating this massive dopamine response that goes up into the cortex and down into the brainstem and cerebellum that hardwires that experience. That aha moment is our brain's geared to rewarding ourselves to figure something out. So, yeah. You know, I mean,
we can go back and look at, you know, Feldenkrais and Shumway Cook. I mean, the list goes on of people that were looking from the motor control and the motor learning world. And I think that the only thing that I can think of is they just didn't have, you know, Feldenkrais tried using the roles and different things to try to create the input and the diversity of movement strategy, which is incredibly diverse. There is no, you know, right, wrong is that you can't do the task. You know, there's millions of ways to achieve the task. Now, a question that we would ask in Polestar is there a more efficient way to execute that task? Is there a way that you can perform the task that might not irritate the symptoms you're having from another injury? If you're a performer, is there a way to enhance your performance for the desired movement outcome or the task? So I love that direction of going with task orientation. We certainly talk about that in Polestar. We look at what are the limitations, what's the desired participation, what tasks do they want to be able to do? They want to go mountain hiking, they want to go surfing, right? So you can see immediately how these two applications of Konnector and OOV for somebody that wants to go surfing could have incredible application to them, you know, when you just put your mind to it and let the body solve its own problem by creating the right task and the right stimulus.
It's also a very important question as an instructor and a practitioner, is that we get so focused on how do you feel, what's happening in your body, where actually the first question I ask when I'm taking my patient history is, what can't you do that you want to do, right? And then we start to gear their rehabilitation towards that, and they gauge, and then they're motivated to do their homework and exercises, but it's all around what task we need to get them to be able to do for them, what they want to do.
So let me give some answers. Just to tell my guests here that when we have our way of communicating the questions that come off of the conference, but they can't see your answers to it. So I'm going to ask you again on these things, but I get to see what it is. So Tracy said, thank you, Daniel. I've used the OOF for rehab during COVID, as I could not even schedule injections. It was just what I needed. Now the group of PTs I work with as Pilates instructors are eager to learn more, and I'll be buying them for the clinic. Brent, any idea when training will begin? Again, I can't wait to see what the wondrous apparatus can do. So, you know, it's coming. If you, we'll give you the link to the uveducation.com/USA in the post-production, and you can go there and see course offerings. We'll do the same thing for the Konnector if you're interested in those course offerings. Anything to add to that, Daniel or Victor, as far as?
It really depends on the government, what the you know, when you guys start to open up, and that it's really dependent on that. We've got courses scheduled from August, but that may change. We're at the, you know, we're in a global lockdown, so it really depends on that. So, but our educators are there, they're ready to teach. I think most people want to start getting back out there again, but it's really just a situation where you guys are at.
Yeah, agree. Joe asked, Victor, can the Konnector be used on any make of reformer? Thoughts on that, Victor? Survey says.
It is designed to fit easily on balanced body reformers, and doesn't matter has a tower, no tower. The only balanced body reformer it's not have it yet, but it's been working on right now is Allegro 2. Yeah. Unless you have Allegro 2, any other balanced body reformers, it will fit.
And then Joe also asked Daniel, says, I was really looking forward to the OOF course in Auckland. Such a shame it had to be canceled. All my clients love the OOF. Thank you. How do you advise to best clean the OOF so as to disinfect in these COVID times? I've noticed that because it's quite porous, if you spray directly onto the OOF, the liquid seems to disappear off the surface.
Yes. So one, we answered this, and we get this asked a lot. So, you know, if you want a written one, just email us at info@uv.com.au. But number one, the OOF, because we developed it to be used in clinics and hospitals, etc., we had to put antifungal, antibacterial retardant agents in. So it's actually antifungal, antibacterial already, and it's manufactured to a TGA Category 1 product already. So that's helpful to know. But number two, we recommend you spray whatever solution you're cleaning the OOF with on a cloth and then wipe the OOF down. A diluted alcohol solution we think is best, something that's not oil-based, because as we know with our vinyl equipment, etc., if you use an oil-based cleaning agent for a long period of time, it will crack. So predominantly what we're recommending in these times is an alcohol-based diluted solution. So, you know, 30% to 50% maximum alcohol diluted solution that you spray onto a cloth and wipe that down. Again, remembering that the OOF has these retardant agents in it, so you know, it inhibits the growth on the actual surface itself.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And along those lines, for the Konnector loops and straps and all the reformer straps, you know, we're suggesting people to buy their own loops and straps for themselves, or using saran wrap, or Balanced Bodies come out with a vinyl wrap that can be disinfected. So, you know, we do have that obligation when your doors open back up to make sure that we're, you know, being compliant with those kind of things. I have a great question from Diane. She says, any chance for online Zoom OOF and Konnector courses? And I bet the two of you are working quickly to figure that out, because I know we are in Polestar, so I'm hoping that you are as well, so that we can be resilient to the COVID virus, whether we're in shutdown or not. they can get this education?
In Kansas, I had one scheduled, and when this COVID thing happened, we kept it and we tried it. We did it online course already. So if there's an interest, they can always let me know at info@connectmethod.com, and we will schedule it. Why not?
We'll give you those links. Daniel, anything?
Like the issue, like we're looking at developing content online definitely, but it will not replace our OOV fundamentals course. The OOV course is not about doing exercises on the OOV, and we're just about to launch a new video platform with hundreds of OOV exercises on that we're shot. We're in the studio actually this weekend doing some final shooting as well. Because really the OOV course is more about a philosophy about how to work with the body and change the movement of the body, and showing how a device like the OOV can facilitate that. So it requires understanding and watching the body change and move three-dimensionally. It's something that's almost impossible to do two-dimensionally. We do it in the studio with multiple cameras, and you'll see with the content that we're shooting now, when we go live with it, you start to see with multiple cameras what the body's doing, but it still never replicates what it does in real life. So, we've thought about it a lot, and the OOV fundamentals course is really about getting people to think three-dimensionally about someone's body and how to change it 3D. And we don't feel that a video education content will be able to replace that. However, we will be supplementing our education with other online learnings. Yes, definitely, but it won't replace our content or try to.
And one of the things that we're doing as well is just the hybridization of education. So the things that can be learned and discussed, even as we're discussing now, or the fact that in a video that's well shot, you can analyze movement better than you can with your naked eye, going back and looking at different ways from an analytical standpoint. But from an experience interactive, I do think some of that technology is coming. I know that GoReact is doing some really cool stuff for virtual physical therapy learning that we're starting to look at for the practical instructions of, even the power and the load that you put in your hands for manual therapy treatment, or to be able to see the, very slow motion, to be able to see what's happening with the gait instruction or those kind of things. So I do think that this hybrid technology is going to be a major part of what we're doing. And I know that Daniel has some really cool access to some 3D motion analysis kind of work. There's a couple of things.
We'll be going live with that. We're testing at the moment, and we're working with a company that we'll be able to go live early next year, like to market, with a 2-camera system where you can set up your phone and your laptop at specific orientations, and it'll actually map three-dimensionally someone's body movement using specific tasks and recommend a treatment program or a Pilates program or an exercise program on what you see. And what we're definitely finding is that your eyes, technology definitely gives you more information than your eyes. There's always limitation to technology, but it gives you a different look at that. So yeah, we're definitely working very hard with our algorithm on that.
I think what it is, Daniel, and having gone through the training too, is it's the real-time experience of the shift or the changing that is experienced. So even if we were able to demonstrate it on a video and to analyze it on a video, there's something powerful about the in-person experience of the lab. One of the things that we're doing, just as a thought for both of you, is that we're creating a centralized cohort for Polestar that will be managed by a centralized facilitator, and then we'll be in small groups in our 30 to 100 host sites around the world that would be in groups of 4 people going through the labs, so they can have experiential, still be COVID compliant, be respectful of the spacing, and then to still be able to have that sort of live face-to-face virtual interaction with actual somebody like Daniel or somebody like Viktor or somebody like myself, to be able to have that. So we're playing with some of those ideas to be able to have that hybrid, because we do think that, COVID's not going to go away in the sense of being gone. They're expecting winter to be worse than summer. We're going to have, it probably won't be global shutdown, but it'll be local, regional shutdowns that we'll have to be able to deal with. And hopefully with more testing and vaccines in the future, we'll be able to manage some of it. But it's a very, what we call, slippery virus, and it's not going to be too easy to manage. So this is something that's a reality for all of us in the physical movement world that is a challenge. There's a couple other questions here that I think are worth answering and asking right now. And Rose said, these are amazing tools. How appropriate are both the Konnector and OOV for individuals living with Parkinson's disease? And I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I know what I think. But if one of you want to take it on, you've both worked with people with Parkinson's disease. Any thoughts?
I'm going to start, Victor. I can go. Look, I definitely with any sort of neurological deficit, actually any sort of proprioceptive feedback is integral to, and if you talk to Darcy Umford and Nancy Bill, definitely integral to a lot of the concepts of what we use in teaching has been taken from neurological rehabilitation, because if they work with someone with a neurological problem or a neurological deficit, it's definitely going to work with a healthy individual, and the concepts and the ideas. So yeah, definitely OOV has been used with not just Parkinson's, but all sorts of neurological diseases and deficits.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that, Victor?
I totally agree. Also, I wanted to mention, I talked to you about this before, Brent. You remember fibromyalgia patients that actually having a hip pain does Konnector, and they say my hip is not hurting. It is not only in a way, it organizes also the muscle firing patterns correctly, so there's a less load on the joints. There's no jamming in the joints, because now both limbs, both sides has to move in the same time and efficiently. So it does work very well.
I think it's interesting in both scenarios. I mean, in Pilates in general, if we, have the right eye for it and we have the right desired outcome of being able to identify movement patterns, movement strategies that are not as efficient as other strategies. And so by using these particular tools with specific tasks, these are things that manifest, but they manifest in a way that the client is able to identify them and spontaneous, talking about, subconscious, spontaneously make the correction because they don't want to fall down or they don't want the asymmetry. So that variable load that's changing all the time in their system is re-educating them. And so, even somebody that has Alzheimer's, somebody that has, cognitive dysfunctions, or we're looking at working with, children with Down's syndrome, or working with cognitive impairment, these are beautiful things to be able to get them to do movement, because it's not going to be a prefrontal lobe strategy. It's going to come from the spinal cord and the cerebellum, which are completely intact with these individuals. And so it's a fantastic way. Victor, go ahead.
Efferent information for the motor control, neurons, things like that. It helps a lot.
Yeah. And the idea of it being in the lower part of the brain stem and coming as, it's just a different world. Pain mechanisms, all of a sudden people are moving in patterns that they're, the information changes. So the thalamus is going like, I don't recognize this. This is not painful. So it's not, it's not the same old pattern that's been burned into our, central nervous system for chronic pain.
Posture is controlled by the cerebellum, and it's something that you need to stimulate the cerebellum, i.e. balance and posture. And the idea of the OOV was to replicate what we have to do in standing, lying down, because it changes our relationship with gravity, where, trying to balance three-dimensionally with gravity is quite complex. But when you lie down, but your body's still able to move three-dimensionally, but gravity is coming to us, vertically from the sagittal plane, it changes our relationship with gravity. So our sensory information of the body changes when you lie down relative to when you stand up. But your still body has to control itself three-dimensionally. That's the whole idea of what we're trying to do.
So we have somebody in the audience, Matilda, that is impressed with the fact of sort of taking the concept to production. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but just to put out there from Matilda, she said, how did you go from your having the idea of the OOV or the connector to actually creating and making these new innovation products? And I mean, I'm going to put one word out there, and it's perseverance. You know, I think it's, you know, I've watched both of these guys go through this process, and you know, you don't create a product like they created without just, you know, tenacity is a word that comes to my mind. Vigor. I mean, I think that they're in the same line of Joseph Pilates creating a reformer. You know, there's a need, there was a demand, and they just kept looking for solutions, and they stuck to it. I mean,
yeah, it's an interesting journey. Definitely, I want to say that it's people like Brent who have supported us that is the reason why we're still here. Because one thing that, you know, I came from the medical device industry, and I you know, for those of you who've heard me talk before, I apologize for repeating myself, but there is a very, very big interrelation between the industry and the surgeons. There has to be. And the surgeons support the industry, and the industry supports the surgeons. Now, you know, without the industry supporting us, without instructors and physical therapists and movement practitioners supporting us, we don't exist. And you know, it's not an easy journey. It's not, you know, making something, people think it's very easy, and it's not, especially when you're trying to create something that doesn't exist already and have to engineer materials and etc. It's a rabbit hole that I don't wish upon my worst enemy. However, you know, it's coming out the other end. It's then the industry and the conversation with the industry, with people like Victor and myself and Brent, to actually then have people. So if you want more innovation, then you need to support industry, and you know, and that's the synergy that we want to, you know, if you want to be, you know, if you want something new, if you want new devices and things to work with your clients and patients, we don't exist if you don't support us. And I want to, you know, I know Victor feels the same way. Brent's been very instrumental in us still being here.
Thank you.
I definitely agree, Daniel, what you're saying. And as an inventor, both of us, I'm sure we feel the same way. We strive for search more. We never settle. That's why we end up inventing something. We got to be really, or maybe we search for it. And for me, there will be nothing better than somebody coming up, maybe even better than Konnector, because that wouldn't make me upset. That will validate what I did was in the right direction, and enable somebody else to move movement to further, even farther than where we can go.
Yeah, great. Thank you both for that. Aria had asked if we're going to have OOV training and Konnector training on the farm here in North Carolina. And, you know, we're planning on having the headquarter, you know, United States, you know, powwow of OOV and Konnector on the farm here, and it's fully equipped. I have 10 reformers or 11 reformers with Konnectors, and I have 10 or 15 OOVs ready to go. And so we've been talking about, of course, the COVID sort of shut us down for the interim, but yeah, there will be training here in North Carolina, and both Daniel and Victor have been to the farm, so they've been able to partake of the fruit out here in Southwind Farm. So yes, Aria, that training will come. Martha had a comment. She just wanted to thank us for the webinars, and she loves the OOV, and she had a question for Victor. Victor, you had this question before, and it has to do with, you know, the idea, and again, I want to be very careful how I tread here, because I've also been trained in Gyrotonic, and I know that they're incredibly sensitive to, you know, anything that they believe is theirs. And so the question is, you know, did you take inspiration from Gyrotonics? And I had mentioned Pino a little bit, as far as I know you'd worked with him a lot, but your thoughts on that, maybe you can answer or not answer, I don't know.
So yes, I worked with Pino for 1 year, and he had the basically second Gyrotonic studio in the world back then. It was his, and it was Julio's in New York. And he was a big influence, obviously, the way I moved. He helped me in my dance career as well. Before I went there 4 or 5 years ago, I've been told by 3 surgeons that I will be paralyzed if I don't fuse my back, and I will never move, I will never dance again. So from there, going and to able to actually move, do something for my body with Pino using Gyrotonics system, plus during that time he was developing his own system, which is the body code system with different machines. So that influenced me for sure. I wouldn't say, I mean, we are who we are because of our past experiences. Saying that how I started really, like, I didn't look at the reformer and said, oh my God, I want to create another gyrotonic movement patterns or the machine. I felt, why can I not move more functional? Why? I felt like I was training bunnies or, you know, kangaroos. Is always both legs moving same time. That was my biggest frustration. And I'm sure in the movement wise, you know, I get influenced. Anything that I do in the past, somebody could say I'm influenced by dance. Some people say my movement patterns is very like a dance-like because I was a dancer.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. That's a great explanation. We're just about out of time, and there's a lot more questions that have come in. One of the things that I want to answer here is there's a number of questions talking about different pathologies and, you know, things dealing with, let's see, I'm looking here, I see one for age of dancers, working with Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disorder, and another one wondering about cerebral palsy and would be useful to the patient. I want to make
just answering the EDS very quickly is that in my experience, you want to create control of this hypermobility of joints. And it's interesting that the question was saying that the practitioner recommended yoga, not Pilates. I would find that, you know, I would say that EDS, you would definitely want to create more motor control around the hypermobility of the joints.
Yeah, and I agree. I was going to bring that up as well, is that, you know, I would say almost exactly the opposite, that yoga tends to have more extreme passive stretching, which is not what the EDS needs. And I would even in the Pilates, I would modify the Pilates to be focused more on control and organization. And this is where things like what the Konnector and the OOV provide in conjunction with the Pilates and a home program have a tremendous amount of benefit to this. One thing I know Daniel's been interested in doing is being able to create the OOV for pediatrics, because we talk about cerebral palsy. You know, I'm thinking about children that with you know, cognitive disorders. So I know that, you know, he's considered it, and I know he's looked at it. I know that Ken Endelman has been interested in creating equipment for children, has done so in the past. But these are things that have incredible impact. And remember, I think if you just break it down as that 30,000 foot look at things, is that, you know, humans have a right to move. We're interested in helping them move better. And if you're human, the things that we're teaching are going to be beneficial to you. When people ask me who doesn't benefit from our way of approaching Pilates, I say people who don't want to get better. You know, Victor's way of saying who is the Konnector good for or not good for? It's like, well, it's good for everybody, and who will not like it? The people that want to cheat. And, you know, in the OOV, it's the same thing, where it's like, look, it's going to manifest ways for us to move better, to be healthier. And, you know, it really can be applied like any skilled tool appropriately or inappropriately. And so it really comes down to the skill set of the teacher being able to assess. And Daniel said this, and I've said this for years, what do you believe you should be able to do that you're not able to do right now? What is the task? What do you want to participate in? And then we look at where they are, we look at where they want to go, and we mind that gap. So we start using our tools and our creativity to be able to get them to where they can function at a level that they want to function at. And I think that's really, you know, our goal and at large. That's why we create things. That's why we modify things. That's why we invent things. And I just feel very privileged to be with these two inventors and, you know, contributors to our profession, to the industrial, and also through the education bracket. It's an honor for me to have Polestar educators teaching their work around the world, and that they've been, influenced by these two great men. And again, there is a day where we're going to get together and maybe invite a few more people, and we're going to spend a week of just brainstorming the heck out of new creations and solutions to human movement and the right that all humans have to move. And so we're all interested in that. There's a few more questions on there. I just want to ask if there's one more thing that either of you would like to say to the audience today. And again, this has been recorded. We'll be sharing any of the links and the links to videos if they're available to any of you that want to have more information. So, Victor?
My biggest thing I wanted to remind everybody again, OOF or Konnector, my biggest aha moment was when I realized the clients to take actions. Like they were actually doing the movement. They weren't just relying on us. They were taking the responsibility, and they are smarter than we think we are. I always say, like, how many of us helped somebody ride a bicycle first time? I mean, it's the best thing. I ride it to my kid, right? So you hold it, you're there, and you tell them, okay, don't fall. Maybe they fall a couple times, but then they start to realize and they learn and they react to the movement that the bicycle giving, so they won't fall. The way I'm seeing, I found myself sometimes we continue holding the bicycle saddle for our clients and we don't let them react because there's no different feedback coming to them. The Konnector OOF creates that environment. They know what they need to do. So it helped me a lot as a teacher as well to focus on different aspects of the task that Daniel explained. And if anybody has any questions, they can reach me at connectmethod.com as well.
Thank you, Victor. Very well said. Daniel?
And just the analogy, I totally agree with Victor, and the analogy there of riding the bike is that, you need to check to see if they can ride the bike, and if they can ride the bike, you don't need to work on them learning to ride the bike. You just go and find out what they can't do. The other thing is, don't stop questioning, don't stop learning, don't stop, testing and experimenting. There is no perfect. If there was, none of us would be here. There wouldn't be anyone with movement problems. There wouldn't be anyone with pathologies. So, there is no perfect system. There is no perfect treatment. There is no perfect exercise. We need to get away from the cookie cutter and really tailor for that individual in front of us. And that means that you've got to play, you've got to figure out the Rubik's Cube that's in front of you. And that's what makes our job the best job in the world, is that we're never going to see two people that are perfectly exactly the same and alike. So to me, that's what makes this job great and fun.
Well, that's something we've been saying for a long time, is that we are client-centric, not method-centric. So the idea is, what are the needs of that individual? In closing, we just want to leave you with the idea of living better and loving life. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Now, next week, I have special guests as well. I have Elizabeth Larkum and Ken Endelman. This will be a reunion of almost 30 years when we organized Polestar in 1992 together. And so I'm really excited to be with my friends from Elizabeth was my first Pilates teacher, and Ken lived in Sacramento, and it was just serendipitous that the three of us were together in 1987 and continued to develop. And, it was Current Concepts Waterbed Company and St. Francis Hospital, and a little physical therapist that was told by his dance teacher that he should go check out the Pilates system in St. Francis Hospital, San Francisco. So we're excited to have that. Please join us. Please tell your friends about it. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Daniel, especially for getting up so early in the morning. Have a great day. We look forward to more inventions and contributions to the beautiful world of human movement. And we'll see the rest of you next week. Thank you.
Thank you,
Brent.